Hey guys, tonight we're heading back thousands of years to the Nile River, into a civilization famed for its pyramids, powerful pharaohs, and gods who watched your every step. But beneath the golden masks and towering temples was a much tougher reality. So today, we're diving into one big question. What if you had to live a single day in ancient Egypt? Because trust me, the blazing sun isn't the only thing that could cook you alive. Before we get into it, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy what I create here. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing the global crowd we gather here. Now go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe switch on a fan for that gentle hum in the background. Let's settle in for tonight's adventure. Welcome to ancient Egypt, a land of towering pyramids, powerful deities, and unforgiving ultraviolet fury. Before your eyes even flicker open, the sun is already pouring into your reed hut like it's trying to prove it's the most merciless god in the sky. There are no curtains, no blinds, and definitely no air conditioning. Just the brutal desert heat, cooking everything in sight, including you, before you've even had breakfast. You're stretched out on a straw mat, covered by a linen sheet that offers more hope than help. That gentle Nile breeze they rave about in travel documentaries? Long gone. Probably gave up the ghost around 2800 BC. By the time you step outside, the heat is already pushing 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 32 degrees Celsius, and it's not even mid-morning. In ancient Egypt, the sun doesn't just shine, it wages war. Your linen tunic? Totally useless. It might as well be tissue paper in a sauna. And forget sunscreen. No aloe vera, no SPF 50, not even a floppy souvenir hat from some beachfront resort. Sure, ancient Egyptians had protective oils, but unless you're rich or serving in a temple, good luck getting your hands on any. Your best bet? Smear yourself with mud or crocodile dung. It might help keep you from going full Human Torch. Emphasis on might. By midday, the ground is so hot you could probably cook lentils on it. Shade? That's a rare commodity. Trees are few and far between. You might manage a sliver of relief behind a mud brick wall, though even that wall feels like it's sweating. Meanwhile, you look like someone tossed you into a clay oven and forgot to check the clock. And don't even think about whining. Ra, the sun god, is watching. In ancient Egypt, the sun wasn't just part of the weather, it was a symbol of divine power. The hotter it got, the more Ra was flexing. So if you're melting into a puddle, congratulations. It's basically a sacred endorsement. Bottom line, getting through one day here takes water, humility, and a serious resistance to feeling like a rotisserie chicken. And this is only the morning. You've finally dragged yourself off that scratchy straw mat and the silver lining. The Nile is just a short walk away. The bad news? You can smell the Nile before you even catch a glimpse of it. Yes, the mighty river, the sacred lifeline of ancient Egypt, the reason civilization thrives here. But let's be real. It reeks like a fish market going through a messy breakup with a swamp. The riverbanks are alive with flies, frogs, and creatures that frankly shouldn't have legs but definitely do. Still, this is your bath spot. Soap isn't a thing yet, and even if it were, it'd be far beyond your budget. Instead, you treat yourself to the finest cleansing tech of the era. Sand. Yep, good old-fashioned exfoliation. Egyptian style. Just scrub yourself down with gritty grains and call it skincare. Think of it as nature's sandpaper, only slightly less effective. As for laundry, that happens in the Nile too. And by laundry, we mean smacking your clothes against rocks while silently hoping a crocodile doesn't decide your tunic looks like lunch. Oh, and just to spice things up, don't forget the occasional splash of sewage drifting down from upstream. Keep in mind, this river is a shared space for people, livestock, and the occasional funeral barge. And yet, this still counts as clean by ancient standards. You scrub, rinse, and emerge feeling a bit less sticky, and only slightly more concerned about unexpected leech encounters. If you live in a city like Memphis or Thebes, you might get lucky with access to a public basin or cistern. But for most people, it's the Nile or nothing. And forget about privacy, this is communal bathing at its finest, shared with families, neighbors, wandering livestock, and the occasional ibis poking around your feet like it's entitled to the space. Water jars are filled and carefully balanced on heads, carried back to your mud brick home before the midday heat turns everything to toast. It's a daily ritual, sacred, essential, and mildly traumatic. So yes, the Nile is revered. It nourishes, cleanses, and keeps you alive. But let's not kid ourselves. It's no crystal clear. In truth, it's equal parts miracle, biohazard, and your only option. And now you've officially bathed in the crocodile-infested Nile. You've scrubbed yourself semi-clean with nature's sandpaper, and your body now feels like a sun-dried fig. Time for breakfast. The most important and least exciting meal of your ancient Egyptian day. Let's manage expectations. No eggs Benedict, no colorful fruit platters, and definitely no iced lattes. Breakfast here isn't about flavor, it's more like a strategic refueling mission. You either perch on a low stool if you're lucky enough to own one, or just crouch in a corner like most people. The star of the meal? Bread. And lots of it. Thick, rough, and often as chewy as an old leather sandal. It's made from emmer wheat or barley and baked in clay ovens that might double as a hangout spot for the neighborhood rats. And don't be shocked if your slice comes with a bit of extra crunch, thanks to the ever-present sand. Not as a topping, just an uninvited bonus courtesy of the grinding stones. Think of it as your daily serving of minerals. Next up, beer. But don't get your hopes up. This isn't a cold, fizzy craft brew. It's thick, cloudy, and lukewarm. More like drinkable bread than anything else. Imagine a porridge pint hybrid, loaded with calories and only lightly fermented. Basically, a prehistoric smoothie with the tang of sour grains and pure survival. Even kids drink it. Not to be cool, but because it's actually safer than water. At least brewing it kills off the parasites, unlike the Nile, which, as we've established, is basically an open-air petri dish. If you're lucky, and we mean very lucky, you might get an onion or a few dried dates to go with your carbon foam special. Protein? Only if someone managed to catch a fish and didn't scarf it down raw on the spot. And as you gnaw on your rock-solid loaf and sip your grainy sludge, flies swarm like it's an all-you-can-eat buffet, because for them, it is. You swat with one hand, grip your cup with the other, and try not to dwell on the fact that this is probably the best meal you'll get all day. In ancient Egypt, breakfast isn't about taste, it's all about survival. It gives your body just enough energy to make it to the next round of sand-laced bread. Bon appetit. You've had your gritty loaf, your chunky beer, and barely enough downtime to pass for rest. Now it's time to work, and believe me, ancient Egyptian labor makes modern burnout feel like a weekend retreat. Unless you're a scribe, priest, or part of the royal elite, and let's be real, you're definitely not. Your job is all muscle and grit. No cubicles, no coffee breaks, no ergonomic chairs. Just endless sweat, choking dust, and the ever-present chance of collapsing before lunch. If you're a farmer, you'll be ankle-deep in Nile mud by sunrise, pulling weeds or planting barley under the watchful glare of an overseer whose main pastime appears to be shouting. You work with wooden plows, rough sickles, and your own bare hands. If your back's aching, congrats. That means you're doing it right. If you're a laborer, the grind gets downright biblical. Picture dragging multi-ton stones for temple construction beneath a punishing sun. Barefoot, up ramps made of gravel and sheer willpower. No ocean breeze to cool you down. You trip? Too bad. That's a broken ankle and a casual shrug from the foreman. Working on tombs? That's a whole new level of exhausting. You're pounding away at limestone, carving out eternal resting places for people who'll relax longer than you ever dream of. And if you botch a pharaoh's tomb, Let's just say your job security might involve being sealed inside, with a curse for company. And if you're a woman, don't think you're off the hook. Domestic duties are just as grueling. Physical labor dressed up as daily routine. You're grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, tending to children, and still expected to pitch in on the farm. Your break is when the baby naps for 7 whole minutes. You eat while working, wipe sweat with your tunic, and keep pushing forward. Slowing down means falling behind, and falling behind means someone else takes your grain quota, and you take the blame. There's no quitting time. The sun is your boss. Only when it dips below the horizon do you drag yourself home, half-conscious, coated in dust, and longing for gentler sandals and a calmer sun god. Labor in ancient Egypt isn't just grueling, it's relentless. It's a total physical devotion to staying alive, day after day, until your body collapses or your overseer deems you unworthy of rations. And that's not even the harshest part. After pouring every ounce of energy into the fields or the quarry, you might feel the urge to complain. Just a minor gripe. Maybe a quiet "this job is awful" or a "why am I even doing this?" Don't even think about it. In ancient Egypt, complaining isn't merely discouraged, it could be seen as treason. Why? Because your superior isn't just a leader. He's a living god. The pharaoh isn't simply a man born into privilege or power. He's the earthly form of Horus, the son of Ra, divinely appointed to govern Egypt and uphold Ma'at, the sacred balance of the universe. In other words, if the river floods generously this year, credit goes to the pharaoh. If it doesn't, perhaps you didn't pray hard enough. Doubting his rule isn't just disrespectful, it's sacrilegious. Saying anything against him could earn you a whipping, a chain around your ankles, or a swift journey to the afterlife without any of your cherished burial treasures. His image is everywhere, on statues, temple carvings, coins, even stamped into the bread you eat. His name echoes through rituals. His figure towers over all others in every mural, not by artistic choice, but by legal decree. And don't expect to ever meet him. If you're a commoner, the closest glimpse you'll get is of a golden boat gliding past during a sacred festival. Miss it, and he's vanished. Back to a palace you'll never set foot in, shielded by layers of guards, scribes, officials, and enough gold to fund a kingdom. Fun fact, he basically does. If you're fortunate enough to be assigned to a royal project, a tomb, a temple, or a statue towering like a mountain, you're said to serve with divine joy. At least, that's the official line. You repeat it too, because acting like it's an honor to carve stone for 14 hours straight is far safer than the alternative. And as for rebellion, don't even consider it. Pharaohs squash uprisings faster than you can say dynasty. Just ask the last village that dared to withhold taxes. Oh, right, you can't. It's been wiped off the map. So, yes, the pharaoh is divine. And you? You're simply fortunate to be allowed to sweat in his honor. Now, back to work. If you thought enduring the sun was tough, wait until you realize that in ancient Egypt, sand is your roommate, your colleague, your condiment, and your worst enemy. It's everywhere. In your clothes, your bed, your meals. There's no avoiding it. Whether you're working, praying, sleeping, or just browsing the market, a sudden blast of scorching wind can hit, turning your face into an uninvited sand scrub session. Let's begin with your wardrobe. You wear linen. It's lightweight, breathable, and about as good at blocking sand as a screen door is at holding water. Sand slips down your tunic, sticks to your skin, and manages to reach folds you didn't even know existed. Hungry? Good luck. Every piece of bread is basically a crunchy sand surprise. Since flour was ground between stone slabs, tiny bits of grit always ended up in the dough. Egyptians didn't just consume wheat, they ate bits of their grindstones along with it. That's why ancient teeth are often worn down smooth like polished river stones. Picture eating breakfast while unknowingly sanding your molars every day. And if you imagined your house was a sand-free haven, think again. Your mud brick home is full of cracks, crevices, and open windows with no glass in sight. Perfect entryways for windblown sand. Your floors are coated, your cooking pot's gritty, and your bed might as well be a sandbox pretending to be furniture. Shoes? Optional, if you're lucky. Most Egyptians went barefoot, which means your feet are constantly on the verge of becoming worn-down leather soles. And if you do own footwear, it's probably a simple pair of sandals made from woven reeds. Stylish, maybe? Protective? Not even close. Then come the sandstorms, Egypt's divine backhand. They strike without warning, spinning and choking everything in their path. One minute you're chatting with a friend, the next you're coughing up grit and feeling like someone funneled a desert straight into your eyes. Visibility vanishes, and everyone nearby becomes a blur of coughing shadows. Simply put, sand is the uninvited roommate who never moves out, the extra seasoning in every bite, and the quiet menace to your eyes, lungs, and pride. It's not just the setting of your life, it's part of you now. And no, scrubbing won't get rid of it. You already tried rinsing off in the Nile, probably just added more sand. In ancient Egypt, religion isn't a once-a-week affair. It's the foundation for everything. Your work, your meals, your cleanliness, even how you wind down for bed. All are shaped by gods with surprisingly detailed preferences. First, know this. The gods are everywhere. Your town likely hosts temples to a dozen different deities, each overseeing some crucial aspect of life. There's Ra, steering the sun across the sky like a celestial chauffeur. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, manages scribes and keeps the lunar calendar in check. Sobek, half crocodile, half nightmare, watches over the Nile. Bastet, the cat goddess, handles divine public relations. Personal freedom? Not really a thing. Your daily schedule is centered around keeping the gods happy. Wake up, thank Ra. Spill some beer, apologize to Hathor. Stub your toe, better mutter that curse under your breath. Spirits with grudges are a real concern. And before every meal, you set aside a portion for the gods. Before bed, you pray that Set, the god of chaos, doesn't throw your home into cosmic turmoil while you sleep. Even funerals are multi-day marathons where the dead must pass trials, dodge demons, and prove their moral worth, or face eternal erasure. And when it comes to the afterlife, ancient Egyptians didn't mess around. They treated it with the utmost seriousness. You don't just die and move on. First you face judgment. Your heart is weighed against the feather of Mayat, the symbol of truth. If your heart is too heavy from lies, cruelty, or maybe swiping someone's goat, you're fed to Ammit, a beast with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the legs straight out of your darkest fears. So yes, even in death, you're still under review. But here's the twist. This elaborate belief system wasn't gloomy. It was reassuring. Egyptians saw life as part of a greater cosmic harmony. And if you followed the rituals and lived by Mayat, the principle of truth and order, you stood a real chance at a serene eternity, surrounded by food, loved ones, and maybe even a boat to cruise the afterlife. Of course, the wealthier you were, the more attention you got from the gods. Temples loomed large. Priests held serious influence, and peasants? They mostly hoped the gods were in a good mood. In ancient Egypt, faith wasn't a choice. It was your job title, your safety net, and your roadmap to the afterlife. So you've stepped on something sharp, been bitten by something strange, or picked up an illness, which in ancient Egypt is just another Tuesday. Time to get medical help, but don't expect a clean clinic or a comfy waiting room. Your treatment will involve a mix of spells, herbs, and a healthy dose of hope. First stop, the doctor. And to be fair, Egyptian physicians were among the most advanced in the ancient world. They had surgical instruments, medical scrolls, and a surprisingly solid grasp of human anatomy. But here's the twist. Egyptian medicine was always blended with magic. You might be treated with a paste made from honey, moldy bread, and crushed herbs. Strangely enough, it kind of works. Honey is naturally antibacterial and mold contains early forms of penicillin. So, yes, it's part science, part sorcery. But before it's applied, the healer usually chants a protective incantation, just in case, since you never know if those stomach pains are from a vengeful spirit or a wrathful deity. Got a headache? Someone might crush onions and rub them into your scalp while chanting a sacred hymn. Chest pain. Let's try smearing a mix of cow dung and dates on you and see the result. Eye infection? That calls for a blend of lizard blood, ochre, and beer, plus a quick prayer to Horus. Need surgery? It did happen occasionally. Abscesses were lanced, fractures were aligned, and cuts were sewn up using linen thread. But there was no anesthesia, only a sharp blade and a friend gripping your shoulders as you screamed into a mud brick pillow. As for dentistry, not ideal. All that gritty sand in the bread meant your teeth were ground down by your 20s. If one got infected, your choices were live with it, die from it, or have it yanked out with something like blacksmith-forged pliers and not the well-made kind. And don't forget the amulets. Whether you're giving birth, getting stitched, or just sneezed a bit too forcefully, a proper doctor priest would likely hang a charm around your neck, just in case the true cause is an unseen serpent spirit wrapped around your spleen. So yes, Egyptian medicine had its strengths, but more often than not, your best hope was divine intervention, because your bandage was, quite literally, a prayer. Here's a plot twist most people don't see coming. Women in ancient Egypt actually had more rights than many in later societies. They could own land, manage businesses, get divorced, and even sue men in court. Sounds pretty progressive, right? But before you start planning a time-traveling girl boss getaway, pump the brakes. Because while the legal rights were impressive, everyday life was far less glamorous. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, chances are you're up before dawn. You start the day grinding grain on a heavy flat stone that wears down both the wheat and your back. Then it's time to fetch water from the Nile, prepare breakfast, tend to children, run the household, feed the animals, and, if needed, work in the fields. You're basically a one-woman workforce wrapped in linen. There's no personal time, no spa retreats, and absolutely no maternity leave. Giving birth is dangerous, exhausting, and comes with no guarantees. Midwives can help, of course, but there are no epidurals, no antiseptics, and definitely no soothing heart playlist to ease the pain. You give birth in a sweltering room filled with incense and prayers, just hoping the bleeding doesn't get out of hand. Now let's talk fashion. Linen dresses are airy and comfortable, but there's no underwear and no footwear. The sun burns your skin, sand gets into every crease, and the bugs treat you like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Want makeup? Sure. Egyptian women wore cosmetics, but they were often lead-based and applied with tools that looked a lot like toothpicks. Now, if you were fortunate enough to be born into a wealthy family, life was definitely easier. You might learn to read and write, oversee estate finances, or even become a priestess. And if you were born royal, you could rise all the way to pharaoh like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, who ruled with sharp minds and even sharper eyeliner. But if you're poor, your rights might exist on paper, yet your life is ruled by the physical grind. You labor, sweat, bend, haul, give birth, bury the lost, and pray. You're not bound by law, but by the need to survive. Still, Egyptian women had a degree of agency, and that counted. They could testify in court, retain their inheritance, and weren't turned into property through marriage. Compared to many ancient cultures, that's a big deal. So yes, Egyptian women had rights. But as for comfort, that was mostly for goddesses and stone-carved queens. Not the woman elbow-deep in dough while swatting flies off a squirming toddler. You've survived another punishing day in ancient Egypt. Eaten your sandy bread, lugged heavy buckets, steered clear of angry deities, and maybe even outrun a sandstorm. Time to unwind? Not quite. Because in ancient Egypt, the real challenge starts after death. Dying isn't the end. It's just the start of a long, bureaucratic journey through the underworld. And if you thought your taskmaster was harsh, just wait until you stand before the gods of judgment. First, your soul travels to the Hall of Mayat. There, you stand before a tribunal of 42 gods and declare your innocence in what might be the world's oldest legal deposition. You recite statements like, I did not steal, I did not lie, I did not covet my neighbor's donkey, and hope the gods believe you. Then comes the heart test. Literally. Your heart, seen as the core of your soul, is placed on a scale opposite the feather of Mayat, the emblem of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. If your heart outweighs the feather, it means you've led a corrupt life. That's when Amit appears, part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus, and entirely terrifying. She doesn't arrest you or banish you. She devours your soul, erasing it forever. No afterlife, no do-overs, just eternal oblivion. And in a culture deeply devoted to eternity, that's the harshest fate imaginable. And it gets worse. You could seal your doom not just through your actions, but through your words. One wrong admission, one missed line during your judgment, and boom, spiritual annihilation. It's like an open book exam where failure means getting eaten by a monstrous hybrid of death. But if you pass, congratulations. You're granted entry to the Field of Reeds, a serene, perfected version of Egypt where your soul lives on forever, surrounded by boats, harvests, loved ones, and hopefully fewer sand fleas. But make no mistake, the stakes are sky high. That's why the Egyptians poured so much energy into preparing tombs, performing funeral rites, and studying magical texts like the Book of the Dead, a spiritual cheat sheet packed with prayers, spells, and pro tips like don't offend the crocodile god. So yes, the afterlife could be stunning, but only if you lived with extreme caution. One slip of the tongue, one missed temple payment, and you're on the menu for Amit. Sweet dreams. If there's any small comfort in ancient Egypt, it's probably the linen. Blessed, breathable linen. Your whole wardrobe, and everyone else's, is crafted from this plant-based fabric. It's lightweight, airy, and helps your skin survive the blazing heat. That's the upside. The downside, that's about as far as comfort goes. Whether you're a farmer, builder, priest, or merchant, you're rocking the same outfit daily. Men wear short white kilts or loincloths. Women wear straight, sleeveless linen dresses, sometimes with straps, sometimes without. If you're upper class, your linen might feature pleats, beads, or decorative patterns. If not, it's plain white, or a dull gray, depending on how many days it's been since laundry day. Speaking of which, laundry means hand-scrubbing your clothes in the Nile while silently praying a hippo doesn't surface mid-rinse. Most people go barefoot. Sandals made from woven reeds or leather are saved for special events or worn by temple priests. So, unless you're royalty, prepare to spend your days with scorching sand between your toes and the occasional sharp rock jabbing your heel. Accessories? Definitely, but mostly for practical use. Amulets offered protection, necklaces signaled status, and eye makeup made from powdered coal wasn't just for looks. It helped cut down sun glare and was believed to prevent infections. Even eyeliner had a purpose in ancient Egypt, but no matter how nice you look, the bugs couldn't care less. Flies, gnats, mosquitoes, they treat your breezy outfit like an open invitation. You spend your day swatting nonstop, dabbing on scented oils, and hoping your linen doesn't cling to you like a damp curtain once the sun hits full blaze. And forget about seasonal fashion. Egypt doesn't really have seasons, just hot and slightly less hot. So your linen outfit is basically your all-season uniform, whether it's 110 degrees under the midday sun or a cool 70 degrees after sunset. Sure, Egyptian clothing was light, elegant, and way more breathable than what the Romans would later squeeze into. But don't be misled by those airy garments, because no matter how floaty your tunic feels, your days are still weighed down by hard labor, relentless heat, gritty sand, and bugs that have zero respect for boundaries. You've made it through another scorching day in ancient Egypt, lugging bricks, sidestepping sandstorms, and hoping your linen doesn't fall apart halfway through the job. But in this world, survival is always short-term. No matter how resilient you are, odds are you won't make it past 35. Let's break it down. If you survive childhood, which is no small feat given the sky-high infant mortality rates, you're considered an adult by 13 and thrown straight into the grind. Marriage, work, and raising children all begin early, because frankly, the clock is ticking. You could die from heat stroke, an infected wound, childbirth, crocodiles, scorpion stings, or even bad bread. And without antibiotics, a fever means your best hope is honey, herbs, and a prayer that the gods aren't aiming to collect your soul just yet. But here's the twist. Egyptians didn't fear death. They prepared for it, often more carefully than people today plan for retirement. If you're wealthy, you commission a tomb, the ancient equivalent of a luxury eternity suite. You begin stockpiling grave goods, jewelry, food offerings, perfumes, statues, even little servant dolls called shabtis, meant to handle your chores in the afterlife. Think of them as eternal interns who work while you rest forever. Your body is embalmed, wrapped in linen, filled with myrrh and natural salts, then placed carefully inside a painted sarcophagus. You're buried with a copy of the Book of the Dead, which isn't all doom and gloom. It's more like a magical travel guide, packed with passwords for the afterlife, spells to outwit demons, and tips for avoiding soul-devouring beasts. If you're poor, though, your final resting place is probably a shallow grave in the sand. Your body is wrapped in whatever cloth your family can find, maybe with a couple of pots placed nearby, then covered over with earth. No murals, no golden mask, just you and the breeze. But even the poorest Egyptians clung to the hope of the afterlife. A serene, fertile realm known as the Field of Reeds, where you could farm without labor, eat without hunger, and sail the Nile eternally beneath soft sunlight. So yes, life in ancient Egypt likely ends young, but if you lived honorably, prayed faithfully, and avoided offending too many jackal-headed gods, you just might land an eternity in comfort. You finally reached the afterlife, or at least made it into the tomb. You've been embalmed, wrapped, blessed, and buried. Time to rest in peace, right? Not quite. Because in ancient Egypt, even the dead weren't safe from thieves. Here's the simple truth. Tombs were packed with valuables. Gold amulets, jewelry, scented oils, carved statues, chests of fine linen, and, in the case of pharaohs, actual boatloads of treasure, all meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. But treasure sealed in a tomb is basically a welcome sign for anyone with a chisel and questionable morals. Tomb robbery was so widespread it turned into a full-time crisis. Pharaohs tried to outsmart it by concealing tombs deep in cliffs, sealing them with hidden doors, and plastering the walls with menacing curses. Warnings like, "May a crocodile devour your soul," or "May your limbs be twisted forever by a serpent of fire." Spoiler alert, the curses didn't work. Grave robbers still came, sneaking in under cover of night, armed with insider knowledge. Sometimes they were locals. Other times they were corrupt laborers who had helped build the tombs. In some cases, even priests and guards were part of the scheme. And if you got caught, the consequences were brutal. Public beatings, mutilation, exile, or execution. But with tombs full of priceless goods, especially gold and rare incense, the reward often outweighed the risk. After all, the dead offer no resistance. But it wasn't only the rich who were targeted. Graves of ordinary people were also looted. Even the poorest Egyptians were often buried with modest offerings, perhaps a pot of beer or a loaf of bread intended for the afterlife. That, too, was worth stealing. Food was limited. Tools held value. Linen acted as currency. The irony is that tomb robbing wasn't always driven by greed. Sometimes it was a matter of survival. Egypt endured famines, political turmoil, and foreign invasions. A starving laborer might raid a tomb not to find riches, but simply to find food. When your children are wasting away, those burial offerings stop being sacred and start looking like a meal. In ancient Egypt, death offered no guarantee of peace. Your tomb could be ransacked, your name wiped from memory, and your mummy torn apart by someone desperate, armed with a pickaxe and little regard for right or wrong. So much for resting in peace. only if your burial site remains a secret. We've all seen them, those striking, enigmatic carvings lining the walls of tombs and temples. Birds, eyes, serpents, lotus blooms, and figures striding sideways like runway models. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Visually captivating, yet incredibly complex to decipher. They may look impressive, but good luck reading them. Hieroglyphs weren't just artistic flourishes. They formed a complete writing system with more than 700 symbols, and the list kept expanding. Some characters stood for entire words, others represented sounds, and many were determinatives. Symbols that added clarity because apparently writing the word star with a star was just too obvious. Don't expect spaces or punctuation either. Ancient Egyptian script was essentially one long, elegant puzzle. Artistic, vowel-free, and completely reliant on context. And just to make it more challenging, it could be written left to right to left, or even top to bottom, depending entirely on the scribe's preference. The key? Check which direction the birds or human figures are facing. That's the way you read. If they're facing right, read to the right. If they're facing left, read to the left. And if they're upside down, well, good luck with that. Learning to write hieroglyphs wasn't for the average person. Literacy was extremely rare. Only about 1% of the population could read and write. To join that elite group, you had to train as a scribe beginning in childhood. That meant memorizing hundreds of symbols, copying endless scrolls, and practicing so much your hand might resemble a claw by the time you were 15. But the reward? Enormous. Scribes were admired, well-fed, and spared the backbreaking work of hauling bricks in the scorching sun. Their duties involved writing tax records, legal documents, correspondence, and sacred texts. They were vital to the functioning of society and largely shielded from physical labor. In a world where literacy meant influence, scribes held silent authority behind the scenes. But for the rest of the population, writing remained something mysterious, almost magical. Quite literally, hieroglyphs were thought to hold sacred power. Inscribing someone's name helped preserve their soul. Erasing it meant complete spiritual destruction. So yes, spelling was a serious matter. While they might resemble ancient emojis at first glance, hieroglyphs were more like a linguistic Rubik's Cube, entwined with mythology, mathematics, and mystery. Stunning to look at? Definitely. Simple to learn? Not even close. After 14 chapters filled with heat, hunger, sand, superstition, and grueling work, it's time to face the ultimate question. Could you survive even one day in ancient Egypt? Let's be real. Probably not. It's tempting to idealize the ancient world. Gleaming tombs, air perfumed with lotus, elegant hieroglyphs, deities with animal heads, and a deep reverence for order and beauty. But beneath the grandeur of those iconic monuments and breathtaking art lay a harsh reality that showed mercy only to the privileged few. For the average Egyptian, each day began on a dirt floor, surrounded by swarms of flies and the constant pressure to work or go hungry. You trudged barefoot across scorching sand, fetched water, cooked over open flames, and lived packed together with insects, smoke, and livestock. You lived in constant fear of illness, divine wrath, or a snake creeping into your bedding at night. There was no toothpaste, no reliable medicine, and certainly no concept of retirement. If you were fortunate, you owned maybe 2 sets of linen clothing. You served a god king who could strip you of your land with a single command, endured a blistering climate that scorched your skin by midday, and followed a religion that demanded you pass an actual divine judgment after death. Just to earn a place in the better afterlife. Let's not overlook what was missing from your life. No antibiotics, no sunscreen, no privacy, no plumbing, no pain relief, and no simple way out. Once you were born into a social class, that was your path. No promotions, no career pivots, no soul-searching sabbaticals. You were a scribe, a farmer, a laborer, a mother, a servant, or you were gone. And yet, despite it all, the ancient Egyptians weren't a joyless people. They held strong faith in their gods, found meaning in their roles, and cherished the beauty of existence. They embraced music, dance, food, family, and celebration. They laughed, created art, and envisioned eternity with such conviction that they built stone monuments that continue to endure thousands of years later. But for someone from today, without air conditioning, filtered water, Advil, sneakers, or a smartphone, you'd probably tap out before the second sandstorm rolled in. So no, you wouldn't survive a day in ancient Egypt. But that's all right, because they endured for thousands of years. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we're still telling their story. In the center of ancient Teotihuacan, one pyramid defies time's erasure. Its walls aren't covered in serene symbols of devotion or benevolent deities, but in fierce, gaping stone serpents, dozens of them. They protrude from the temple's facade as if caught mid-attack, fangs exposed, eyes glaring. This is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, known to many as the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. But unlike most temples that rise skyward in reverence, this one carries a darker presence. It feels predatory. From the moment you draw near, there's an unsettling sensation, like unseen eyes are fixed on you. The stone serpent heads aren't just ornamental. They serve as warnings, emblems of divine fury. And under their unblinking stare, something terrifying once took place. Excavations in recent decades uncovered something archaeologists never anticipated. Beneath the temple's foundation lay more than ritual offerings, something far more unsettling. Human remains. And not just a few. Over 200 bodies were found, many decapitated, their hands tied behind their backs. Young men, likely warriors, interred in groups. Ritual sacrifices laid out with chilling mathematical precision. Some were buried with obsidian blades by their sides, others adorned with necklaces strung from human teeth or jewelry fashioned from jawbones. These bodies weren't carelessly discarded. They were arranged with deliberate, symbolic intent. This wasn't a mass grave, it was a message, a sacred exchange etched into the earth, inscribed in stone and sealed with blood. But what kind of belief system could justify such brutality? Who required so many lives to be claimed at once? The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was more than a place of worship. It was a stage for power where rulers intertwined cosmology, warfare, and fear to command a city of over 100,000 people. This ritual bloodshed may have been seen as the price for preserving cosmic order. As you stand before this temple now, staring into the carved eyes of those stone serpents, you're not just witnessing art or architecture. You're confronting the worldview of a civilization that believed the gods demanded blood, and believed it was their sacred duty to provide it. But who were these people? Who orchestrated such violence and then disappeared, leaving almost nothing behind? The answer lingers in the shadows of Teotihuacan. Long before the rise of the powerful Aztec Empire and before the Maya etched their celestial calendar into stone, there existed a city unlike any other in the ancient Americas, Teotihuacan. Its name, bestowed by the later Aztecs, means the place where gods were born. And as you walk along its vast avenue of the dead, bordered by pyramids that seem to touch the sky, the meaning behind its name becomes clear. At its peak, between 100 and 250 CE, Teotihuacan was a massive urban center with a population exceeding 100,000, ranking it among the largest cities on Earth at the time, rivaling the likes of ancient Rome, Alexandria, and Chang'an in both scale and influence. It was a city crafted with remarkable precision, broad avenues, paved roads, and apartment compounds built to house entire extended families. Multi-story buildings made of volcanic stone rose across the landscape, and at its very heart stood three monumental pyramids: the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Sun, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. But here's what sets Teotihuacan apart. No one knows who built it. Seriously, even today, the identity of its creators remains a mystery. We don't know what they called themselves, and there are no surviving written records to tell us. No royal names etched into stone, No inscriptions boasting of conquests or rulers, just silence. Teotihuacan appears to have been governed not by a single king, but possibly by a council, a theocracy, or a political structure entirely unfamiliar to our concept of ancient rule. Yet despite this mysterious anonymity, their reach was immense. Traces of Teotihuacan's influence have been uncovered hundreds of miles away, from the Maya cities of Tikal and Copan to the distant Zapotec capital of Monte Alban. Obsidian blades, distinctive ceramics, murals, and even signs of political interference. Teotihuacan's fingerprints are everywhere. In one instance, its emissaries may have played a role in toppling a Maya king to install a more compliant ruler. But how did they sustain such an expansive sphere of influence? How did a civilization with no known writing system wield such power across Mesoamerica? The key may lie in their fusion of cosmic ideology with political strategy, blending religion and governance into a force that extended far beyond their city's borders. Their temples were not just centers of worship, they were instruments of authority. Aligned with celestial events, they doubled as stages for ritual sacrifice, sending a powerful message to citizens and outsiders alike. Teotihuacan was no ordinary city. It was the axis of the universe, a sacred machine that synchronized time, destiny, and blood into a single, unstoppable rhythm. At the center of it all stood the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. To truly grasp its significance, you need to understand the deity it honored, the Feathered Serpent. Later called Quetzalcoatl by the Aztecs and Kukulkan by the Maya, this god is one of the most mysterious figures in Mesoamerican mythology. But in Teotihuacan, long before the Aztecs emerged, the feathered serpent was already a pivotal, perhaps even the supreme divine power. Here's the paradox. What kind of god can be both a serpent and a bird? Consider this. Serpents crawl through the underworld, shedding their skin as a symbol of rebirth, duality, and death. Birds, on the other hand, soar through the sky near the sun, embodying freedom, divinity, and the life-giving breath of the wind. By merging these opposites, earthbound and skyborn, death and life, chaos and order, they created something truly cosmic and fearsomely powerful. The feathered serpent was more than a god. He was a link between worlds. Carved deeply into the temple's facade, dozens of his images gaze out at us. Bulging eyes, exposed fangs, and feathered headdresses. Some historians argue these figures represent the god himself. Others think they depict warriors or priests dressed in sacred attire to display their power. Either way, these snake-bird hybrids are everywhere. The temple's surface is covered with them, as if the entire building pulses with divine life. But the feathered serpent wasn't only a god of the skies. He was deeply connected to sacrifice. Blood was the energy that kept the universe turning. And Quetzalcoatl, later remembered as a kind, civilizing figure, held a far darker role in Teotihuacan. He demanded offerings, not just maize or incense, but life itself. In some legends, he descended into the underworld to recover the bones of the dead and use them to create humanity. But to create life from death, a balance had to be maintained. The gods sacrificed themselves for humanity, and in return, humans were expected to make sacrifices as well. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a place of worship, it was a cosmic machine, designed to connect the heavens, the earth, and the underworld through ritual. Every stone, every serpent head, and every buried sacrifice played a part in this sacred system. Teotihuacan didn't merely worship the feathered serpent. They lived by his logic, embraced his paradox, and channeled his power and blood. But the darkest secrets lay buried beneath the surface. For centuries, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stood silently, an ancient, weathered monument slowly being claimed by time. Locals passed down whispers of legends. Scholars speculated. Yet no one could have predicted what lay hidden beneath its layered stones until archaeologists finally uncovered it in the late 1980s and early 2000s. What they uncovered was not only surprising, it was deeply unsettling. Beneath the temple's foundations lay a series of long-sealed chambers and pits, each filled with meticulously arranged human remains. This wasn't the chaotic aftermath of battle or illness. These were deliberate sacrifices, systematic, ritualistic, and chillingly precise. The victims, over 200 young men, many aged between 15 and 25, were found with haunting details. Some wore necklaces crafted from human jawbones, while others had their hands bound behind their backs. A number were decapitated. Nearby lay obsidian knives, dark and razor-sharp, the unmistakable instruments of ritual sacrifice. And here's where it becomes even more chilling. The bodies were arranged according to precise geometric and symbolic patterns. They weren't buried by chance. Instead, the bodies were positioned in quadrants aligned with the cardinal directions, likely reflecting the structure of the cosmos. Even the number of victims held significance. This wasn't merely about death, it was about meaningful, purposeful death. Surrounding the bodies were offerings, jaguar bones, snakes, rare shells from the distant Gulf Coast, figurines, and obsidian blades that showed no signs of battle use. This wasn't punishment, it was an offering. These young men, probably warriors, weren't chosen to die in shame, but to participate in something greater, something transcendent. To the people of Teotihuacan, constructing the temple itself may have demanded human sacrifice. It was as if each stone needed to be sanctified with blood. Each new layer of the temple was built only after an offering had been made. The deeper archaeologists dug, the more sacrifices they uncovered. In one chamber, they found intricate tunnels filled with mercury and mica, materials linked to the underworld. The floor shimmered as if it were water. Was this a symbolic gateway to the realm of the dead? A reflection of the night sky? The deeper they dug, the more it seemed the temple wasn't just built over death. It was designed to contain it. The blood wasn't spilled onto the stone by chance. The stone was made to hold that blood, all as an offering to the gods. Look closely at the temple of the feathered serpent, and you'll spot something unusual, something unsettling. The temple doesn't merely rest on the landscape, it aligns with the cosmos. Teotihuacan wasn't built by chance. The whole city was designed along exact cosmic axes. Its main avenue of the dead is positioned 15 degrees off true north. Not an error, but a purposeful adjustment, likely to line up with the setting of the Pleiades star cluster or the sun on important ritual dates. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent stands proudly along this avenue, anchoring it within a vast celestial design. But why? What celestial event were they attempting to align with? For decades, archaeologists and astronomers have debated this question. Some believe the temple is aligned with the equinox sunrise, while others contend that it is connected to Venus, the planet most revered by Mesoamerican civilizations, often symbolizing war, sacrifice, and rebirth. When Venus rose or set, it marked the moment for declaring wars, making offerings, and lighting ritual fires within the temples. Even the temple's measurements seem purposeful. The recurring number 7, representing the visible planetary bodies, is echoed in its step platforms. There's a clear sense of symmetry, rhythm, and a profound grasp of both earthly mathematics and cosmic cycles. And beneath the surface, even more clues lie hidden. In 2003, archaeologists discovered a tunnel beneath the temple. It wasn't a simple, rough passage, but a carefully crafted subterranean realm. The walls had once been coated in powdered pyrite, a glimmering mineral that would have reflected light like starlight. Along with mercury pools and finely aligned walls, the tunnel appeared to be designed to mirror the cosmos itself. Walking through it would feel like traveling through the Milky Way, a symbolic passage to the underworld or perhaps to rebirth. Could this temple have been more than just a place of sacrifice? Was it a cosmic machine? A portal that connected the earth, sky, and the spirit realm? The mercury, once thought to be merely toxic, may have represented water or the fluid veil between worlds. And among all these glittering fragments, one persistent whisper remained. The feathered serpent still lingered, not just as a myth, but as a presence in murals, in carvings, and in the very geometry of the temple itself. The serpent hadn't disappeared. It had coiled inward, deep into the bones of the city, waiting to be rediscovered. And with each excavation, each uncovered jawbone or golden ornament, we draw a little closer to its message. One carved not in language but in stone, sacrifice and shadow. Modern science has provided us with X-rays, drones, and ground-penetrating radar. Yet, even with all our tools, one truth remains. The temple still keeps secrets. Today, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stands as a haunting monument, not just to a civilization long gone, but to a way of thinking that fused power, the cosmos, and death into one unbreakable system. Tourists snap photos. Children run past the stone serpent heads, but the ground beneath their feet is soaked in 1,000 untold stories and over 200 known human sacrifices. Yet, the temple endures. Its legacy is not just architectural, it's psychological, spiritual, and cultural. The feathered serpent, this paradoxical god of sky and earth, continued to evolve. He would be adopted by the Toltecs, then reborn by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, where his myth took on a gentler tone. The bringer of knowledge, the god who wept for humanity, the one who vowed to return. This reimagining of the serpent god reveals how myths don't die, they transform. Even in modern Mexico, echoes of the feathered serpent persist in art, murals, literature, and national identity. The temple's image has appeared on coins, stamps, and even government buildings. It has become a symbol of mystery, pre-Columbian brilliance, and the untamed spiritual world that once pulsed through Mesoamerica. But there's another legacy, one less visible and more uncomfortable. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent forces us to confront the price of belief. It asks hard questions. How far will humans go to feel connected to the divine? What happens when power and religion become indistinguishable? Can beauty coexist with terror? In many ways, the temple isn't just a historical site. It's a mirror, a reflection of us. Our fascination with life after death, our hunger for meaning, our capacity to build monuments of staggering beauty and to stain them with blood. The temple teaches us that greatness comes with shadows, that civilizations can soar to impossible heights while burying their secrets beneath the stones. And maybe that's why we keep returning. Not just to visit, but to understand. Because deep down, we know the serpent is still watching. Not to strike, but to remind. Remind us of what we once were and what we still might be. Before we spoke in words, we spoke in rhythm. Tens of thousands of years ago, long before the invention of writing, even before the birth of language itself, early humans began to create something that could only be described as sound with intention. Not speech, not melody, but rhythm. A hand slapping hollow bark, a stick tapping a stone, a foot stomping earth in time. Somewhere in that ancient repetition, something magical emerged. The first drum beat. It wasn't called music, it wasn't called anything, but it felt like something. Like communication, like movement, like emotion taking form. Anthropologists have uncovered evidence of primitive percussion instruments dating back over 30,000 years. These were likely made from natural materials. Tree trunks, hollowed out gourds, stretched animal hides. Nothing fancy, nothing preserved. But these rudimentary drums were not toys or idle distractions. They served real purposes, to warn, to summon, to connect. Imagine a tribe scattered across a dense forest. One beat from a distant drum, and others knew danger was coming or a celebration had begun. Or the gods are listening. The earliest drums weren't just tools, they were extensions of the human body, a heartbeat externalized, a pulse that could be felt across a valley. Drumming wasn't something you watched or listened to. It was something you participated in together around fires, under stars, in caves where echoes made the air itself vibrate. These ancient rhythms became a language of emotion, joy, grief, warning, hope, all expressed not in syllables or symbols, but in patterned sound. Before the first flutes were carved, before string instruments were imagined, the drum was already alive, anchoring us in time, giving shape to ritual and uniting individuals into tribes. In that way, the drum became humanity's first instrument and perhaps its first form of collective identity. No matter where on Earth people lived, they created something to strike, something to beat, something to mark the moment. Because even when we had no words, we had rhythm, and that rhythm was everything. In the cradle of early human civilization, drums were not just instruments, they were sacred voices. Every tribe, every culture, every corner of the earth developed its own rhythm. But the purpose was nearly universal, to commune with the unseen. In Africa, where some of the world's earliest drums emerged, rhythm was deeply intertwined with life, death, and ancestry. The djembe, carved from a single tree and wrapped in goatskin, was believed to contain 3 spirits. That of the tree it was carved from, the animal whose skin gave it voice, and the craftsman who brought it to life. Played in circles, the djembe didn't just accompany rituals, it was the ritual. Then there were the talking drums, capable of mimicking human speech through pitch and tone. In West Africa, these drums carried messages across miles, relaying news, warnings, births, and deaths from one village to the next. But in times of conflict, they echoed through city walls, terrifying enemies with a deep, relentless thunder. It wasn't just percussion, it was psychological warfare. When the Romans marched, they brought with them the tympanum, a frame drum used in processions and by cults like that of Cybele. Though not a battlefield instrument in the way horns and standards were, it carried symbolic power, a sound of empire, discipline, and order. But no army wielded drums quite like the Ottomans. Their medderbands, the world's first known military orchestras, unleashed an overwhelming storm of drums, cymbals, and horns before battles. The relentless pounding of koos, giant kettle drums, and davel, double-headed bass drums, struck terror into the hearts of enemy forces. Some European accounts describe soldiers freezing in panic before even seeing the Ottomans, paralyzed by sound. Drums also enforced power off the battlefield. In royal courts across Asia, Africa, and Europe, drum ensembles announced arrivals, marked coronations, and underscored political rituals. To beat a drum was to declare us power is present. Even enslaved people in the Americas used drums as tools of resistance. On plantations, rhythmic communication kept culture alive and helped orchestrate secret rebellions. The drum, even under oppression, refused to be silenced. So, whether it signaled divine right, military discipline, or raw fear, the drum has always carried a message. This is who rules. This is who marches, and this is the rhythm of power. As civilizations branched out across continents, so too did their rhythms, evolving in form, purpose, and philosophy. In the East, drums became tools of precision, spirituality, and ceremony. In the West, they leaned into military power and eventually orchestral grandeur. 2 worlds, 2 paths, 1 heartbeat. In India, the drum became a sacred instrument of divine language. The tabla, with its crisp tones and fluid grace, was used in classical music and devotional performances. But it was more than accompaniment. It was conversation. Each stroke had a name, a meaning, a syllabic identity. Indian drumming wasn't just percussive, it was spoken poetry honed over decades. The tabla player was not just a musician, he was a master of rhythm. In Japan, the Tao drum stood as a monumental symbol. It was used in Shinto ceremonies, performances, and battles. Playing the Tao drum demanded not only technical expertise, but also physical dedication. The drummers moved with military-like precision. Their postures were solid like those of warriors. During festivals, the resonating sound of the Tao echoed through the mountain valleys, believed to ward off evil spirits and summon the gods to the earth. In Indonesia, the kendang drum drove the mesmerizing rhythms of gamelan orchestras, directing dancers and musicians in sacred temple rituals. These rhythms were intricate, interconnected, and divine, a musical representation of cosmic balance. Meanwhile, in Europe, drums told a different tale. During the medieval period, drums served mainly practical purposes, signaling soldiers, keeping time, and maintaining discipline. It wasn't until the Renaissance and Baroque periods that drums started to feature in formal music. Even then, they remained in the background, rumbling beneath royal fanfares or reverberating through grand cathedrals. In this contrast, two philosophies emerge. The East viewed rhythm as both art and spirit, intertwined with breath, chant, and meditation. The West, on the other hand, saw it as structure and force, a tool for rallying, marching, and measuring. Yet both recognized the drum's fundamental power to shape time, set the pace, enhance ritual, and unite people in ways that go beyond language. Whether in the East or West, sacred or strategic, the drum remained essential, always listening, always speaking. From mountaintop temples to jungle clearings, from desert fires to candlelit cathedrals, drums have always held a space where the human meets the divine. Long before organized religion took hold, rhythm had already become a sacred language, a means to pray, summon, and transcend. In Africa, drums were more than mere instruments. They were spiritual entities. In Yoruba traditions, for instance, the batar drum was used to communicate with the orishas, gods, and ancestral spirits. Drummers weren't just performers, they were priests. The rhythms they played were sacred prayers, calling the gods to descend and dance among the living. Every pattern had a purpose, every beat a direction. In Hinduism, the drum even finds its place in the hands of gods. The deity Shiva, in his form as Nataraja, dances the cosmic dance of creation and destruction, holding a small hourglass-shaped drum, the damaru. Its rhythm symbolizes the very pulse of the universe. From silence to sound, from void to form, the drum is a divine heartbeat. In Buddhism, the ritual frame drum is used in monastic chants and meditation practices. Its gentle, slow beats help guide breath and awareness, serving as a metronome for the soul. It's not loud or forceful, but instead gently reminds the practitioner to return, time and again, to the present moment. Across the Americas, indigenous tribes incorporate drums in vision quests, sweat lodges, and healing ceremonies. The beat is constant, steady, echoing the rhythm of the womb, aiding participants in entering trance states or connecting with ancestral spirits. In these spaces, the drum isn't just an accompaniment to prayer, it is the prayer itself. Even within Christianity, where rhythm was often restrained, the drum found its sacred place. In gospel traditions, especially within African American churches, drums became a vehicle for praise and power, a heartbeat that supported voices raised in devotion, a symbol of struggle, hope, and the divine rhythm present in every life. Regardless of the faith, the ritual, or the god being invoked, the drum has always been present, not as decoration, but as a vessel for energy, intention, and the mysteries beyond words. When words falter in worship, rhythm endures, and the divine listens. For thousands of years, drums were solitary instruments. One body, one sound, one purpose. But in the midst of the industrial age, something revolutionary occurred. In factories, streets, and music halls, percussion was reinvented. By the early 20th century, multiple drums were no longer spread across a stage. Instead, they were brought together, creating something entirely new: the drum kit. It emerged out of necessity. In the late 1800s, military and theater bands needed several percussionists to play the bass drum, snare, cymbals, and woodblocks, with each drum managed by a different person. Space was limited, and budgets even tighter. So, drummers started combining instruments into a single playable setup. In 1909, the first bass drum pedal was patented, allowing a drummer to strike a large drum with one foot, freeing up their hands for other tasks. The concept quickly gained popularity. Over the following decades, drummers added hi-hats, toms, cowbells, and ride cymbals, crafting a setup that could replicate an entire percussion section, all from one seat. What emerged was more than just a tool. It became a drummer's throne. Then came jazz. In the smoky clubs and underground dance halls of New Orleans and Chicago, the drum kit came alive. Jazz drummers didn't merely keep time. They played the kit like a voice, filled with syncopation, swing, and sensitivity. Legends like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich transformed the drum set into a lead instrument. Rhythm became a form of storytelling. As jazz evolved into rock, the drum kit grew louder, heavier, and more powerful. The 1960s and 70s saw kits expand with multiple toms, splash cymbals, and double bass pedals. Drummers like John Bonham, Neil Peart, and Keith Moon pushed the boundaries of both stamina and creativity. It stands as a symbol of modern rhythm, a fusion of centuries, where tradition meets innovation, and where one drummer can speak with 10 voices at once. The world pulses in thousands of dialects, and so do its drums. From continent to continent, culture to culture, the drum has taken countless forms, each carrying its own unique identity, sound, and purpose. These aren't just instruments, they are cultural signatures, crafted from local materials, shaped by local hands, and immersed in the rhythms of daily life. In West Africa, the djembe remains a heartbeat of community gatherings. It speaks with sharp slaps and deep bass tones designed for storytelling and spontaneous conversation. Alongside it, the dondon provides the foundational pulse, a rhythmic anchor around which others can dance. In Africa, a drum ensemble isn't merely music. It's a conversation between spirits, ancestors, and the living. In the Middle East, the darbuka, a goblet-shaped drum made of clay or metal, produces sharp, fast-paced rhythms that are essential to belly dancing and classical Arabic music. Its voice is crisp and articulate, demanding precision from its player and movement from its listeners. Across the Caribbean and Latin America, drums tell a different story, one born from resilience and fusion. The conga, bongo, and timbales reflect the mix of African, indigenous, and Spanish influences. In Cuba, the sacred bata drums are used in Santeria rituals. Each drum speaks a divine language, connected to the orishas. In Brazil, the thunderous sound of the surdo and cuica drive samba parades through the streets, infusing joy into protest, prayer, and carnival. In India, the mridangam and tabla dominate South and North Indian classical music respectively. These drums are so precise they are tuned to pitch, blurring the line between rhythm and melody. Every finger movement matters, and each stroke carries centuries of tradition. Then there's the frame drum, one of the oldest in human history, appearing in everything from the Persian daf to the Irish bodhran, from shamanic tools to folk ensembles. Played with fingertips, mallets, or brushes, the frame drum proves that even simplicity can be sacred. What unites them all? Purpose. Whether guiding dance, healing, ritual, or revolution, each drum reflects the soul of its people. Their rhythms carry geography, history, and identity. The global drum family isn't just diverse, it's universal, because no matter where you go, the earth still echoes with rhythm. As the 20th century came to a close, the sound of drums began to evolve, not in rhythm but in texture. The physical gave way to the programmable. The sweaty palms, wooden sticks, and calloused fingertips started to share space with circuits, pads, and software. The age of digital drums had arrived. It began in the 1970s with primitive drum machines, early devices like the Rhythmicon and Roland CR78, which used analog circuits to simulate basic beats. At first, their sound was robotic, even awkward, but musicians saw something else: consistency, control, and limitless possibilities. Then, a revolution came. In 1980, Roland released the TR-808, a drum machine so iconic that its deep, booming kick and sharp snare would go on to define entire genres. Hip-hop, techno, electro, and trap were all partially born from its synthetic pulse. It was no longer about mimicking acoustic drums. It was about creating entirely new sounds. As digital audio advanced, so did the tools. Electronic drum kits like the Roland Vi drums allowed drummers to play naturally while triggering thousands of sampled or synthesized tones. Artists could now rehearse silently, record without microphones, and switch drum kits with the press of a button. With the advent of computers also came digital audio workstations, DAWs, like Ableton, FL Studio, and Logic. Now, anyone with a laptop could craft complex rhythms, layering kicks, snares, hi-hats, and sub-bass into expansive sonic structures. Finger drumming on MIDI pads became an art form in itself. Some feared this shift would mark the end of traditional drumming, replacing human feel with cold precision. But that didn't happen. Instead, hybridity emerged. The tools have changed, but the purpose remains the same: to move bodies, to shape time, to make silence speak. Across every era, every empire, and every evolution in technology, one thing has never changed. The drum remains our oldest and most enduring voice. From ancient fire circles to modern concert halls, from sacred rituals to digital dance floors, the drum has never been just about music. It's about connection, to ourselves, to each other, to something greater. It is the heartbeat we all share. Not metaphorically, but literally. Because even before we're born, nestled in the womb, the first rhythm we ever hear is the sound of our mother's heart. Steady, safe, alive. And when life begins, we chase that rhythm forever. The drum has been our companion through joy and war, worship and protest. It has marched beside kings and risen with rebels. It has echoed through temples and subway tunnels. It speaks in every language because it is a language that bypasses thought and speaks directly to the body, the bones, the blood. In moments of grief, we drum to mourn. In moments of ecstasy, we drum to celebrate. And in the quiet spaces in between, we drum to remember who we are. Today, percussion continues to evolve. You can find handpan street musicians weaving new age rhythms on city corners, indigenous communities preserving ancient drumming traditions against all odds, stadium drummers rallying crowds in unison, and children banging pots and pans with instinctual joy. Even artificial intelligence is learning rhythm, but no algorithm can replicate the human soul behind a single imperfect beat. Because rhythm is not just counted, it's felt. And maybe that's why the drum has outlived empires and trends, because deep down, we all crave the anchor of time, the shared pulse that reminds us we are here together now. No matter how advanced our instruments become or how virtual our experiences grow, there will always be something profoundly grounding about skin on skin, stick on hide, hand on wood, a beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum is not a relic of the past. It is a reminder that we were always meant to move in rhythm, to listen, to feel, to play. And as long as humanity endures, the drum will never be silent. Before Manhattan became a forest of glass and steel, it was an island of shadows, not cast by towers, but by church steeples and sloping rooftops. In the early 1800s, the skyline barely existed. The city clung to the southern tip of the island, a dense sprawl of brick townhouses, timber-framed shops, and dirt-packed roads. Buildings rarely rose beyond 5 or 6 stories. Not because ambition was lacking, but because gravity had the final say. The taller the building, the more weight it bore, and with stone and brick, height came at a steep cost. The walls had to be thicker at the bottom to support the upper levels, leaving less space inside and requiring massive foundations. To build high was to build heavy, and heavy didn't make financial sense. So, the city grew horizontally, spreading northward along a grid that had been planned in 1811, one of the boldest urban blueprints of its time. But beneath that grid, beneath the layers of cobblestone and soil, Manhattan held a secret weapon: bedrock. Deep, dense, and unwavering. The granite spine that ran beneath the island would one day support some of the tallest structures in human history. But for now, it lay quiet, untouched, waiting. Life in early Manhattan was noisy yet grounded. Commerce thrived in the harbor, Ships filled the piers and horses clattered through the narrow streets. The economy grew, immigration surged, and the island swelled with energy, but still, the city remained anchored to the ground. The sky stayed untouched. The only real vertical statements were churches, with Trinity Church being the most prominent. Its spire, completed in 1846, rose over 280 feet, and for a time, it was the tallest structure in New York. But even that was more symbol than skyline. What no one knew then was that the skyline's future wouldn't be shaped by stone or wood, but by iron, steel, and vision. And it wouldn't be confined to the ground. It would rise far above it. Manhattan wasn't yet a city of towers, but the stage was being set. The island was ready. The dream was taking shape, and soon the skyline would begin to stretch. For centuries, gravity was Manhattan's greatest architect. It kept buildings short, cities flat, and human ambition tethered to the earth. But in the mid-19th century, two breakthroughs would open the skyline wide. One lifted people, the other lifted buildings. The first came in 1852 when an inventor named Elisha Otis unveiled his revolutionary safety elevator. In a dramatic demonstration at the New York Crystal Palace, Otis stood on a platform suspended high above a crowd. He ordered the rope to be cut. The crowd gasped, but the platform didn't fall. A hidden mechanism locked the lift in place. With that single breathtaking moment, Otis changed the rules of height. Until then, the top floors of buildings were the least desirable. No one wanted to climb stairs. But once elevators became safe and practical, those upper floors turned into premium space, offering light, air, and status. The vertical city suddenly made economic sense. But simply moving people upward wasn't enough. Buildings still relied on load-bearing walls, which grew thicker and more cumbersome the higher they went. That's where innovation number 2 arrived: the steel skeleton. In the 1880s and 1890s, engineers began using steel frames to support the weight of buildings, allowing exterior walls to become thin curtains instead of heavy structural anchors. This method, known as steel frame construction, gave architects newfound freedom: build as high as the frame could handle. Suddenly, height was no longer a risk, it was a strategy. The technology had arrived. The materials were here. And Manhattan, with its solid bedrock and booming economy, was the perfect canvas. The island's tight geography encouraged vertical thinking, and its status as a financial capital meant that everyone, from banks to newspapers, wanted their name visible in the clouds. The elevator made the sky accessible. The steel skeleton made the sky buildable. Together, they didn't just change architecture, they redefined what a city could be. Now the race would begin. Not outward, but upward. By the late 19th century, New York City was no longer content to sprawl. It wanted to soar. The ground was full, the streets were packed, and the only place left to build was up. With steel frame construction and the elevator now established, Manhattan became a proving ground, and the skyline a battlefield for ambition. The first shots were fired in the 1890s. In 1890, the New York World Building, home to Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper empire, rose 20 stories above Park Row. It was the tallest office building in the world briefly. Not to be outdone, the Park Row building claimed the title next in 1899, standing at 391 feet. Each new tower was a declaration, not just of wealth, but of vision. To build higher was to announce, "We are the future." Soon, the skyline began to sprout with steel giants. The Singer Building, completed in 1908, stood at 612 feet, becoming the tallest building in the world, and the first structure to surpass the height of Trinity Church's spire, which had held the record for over 50 years. But that triumph was short-lived. In 1913, the Woolworth Building seized the title. Designed by architect Cass Gilbert and paid for in cash by retail tycoon Frank W. Woolworth, it climbed 792 feet across 55 stories in a breathtaking display of neo-Gothic elegance. Known as the Cathedral of Commerce, the Woolworth wasn't just tall, it was grand, a bold architectural statement of America's emergence as a global force. But this wasn't only about buildings, it was a war of branding. Corporations and institutions competed to create the tallest, most iconic structures, towers that would carve their identity into the skyline. Each new record made headlines. Each unique form stood as a statement. The skyscraper evolved into the ultimate advertisement, bold, enduring, and unavoidable. Beneath this ambition, the pulse of progress never paused. Steam shovels tore into granite, laying the groundwork for the future. Riveters pounded steel around the clock. Immigrants and ironworkers stood on narrow beams high above the streets with no harnesses, just courage and determination. The skyline was no longer an idea, it was tangible and growing. As the 1920s swept through Manhattan, the skyline didn't just ascend, it began to sway with flair. This was the age of Art Deco, when architecture became a celebration of both elevation and elegance. The Jazz Age infused steel and stone with sophistication, turning New York's architecture into symbols of motion, light, and vitality. The most striking of them all was the Chrysler Building. Finished in 1930, it soared to 1,046 feet, claiming the title of the world's tallest building, if only for a moment. Commissioned by automobile tycoon Walter Chrysler, the skyscraper was more than a testament to business triumph. It was a masterpiece of artistry. Its stainless steel spire, constructed in secrecy and lifted into position overnight, gleamed in the sunlight like a crown. Sleek eagles, inspired by car hood ornaments, projected from its corners like sentinels of tomorrow. With sweeping curves, bold chevrons, and intricate machine-age accents, the Chrysler Building didn't just reach for the heavens, it captivated them. Yet, the competition was far from finished. Just a few blocks away, another giant was taking shape. The Empire State Building, finished in 1931 amid the hardships of the Great Depression, soared to 1,250 feet, snatching the title from the Chrysler and holding it for nearly 4 decades. Constructed in just 410 days, with thousands of workers braving wind, snow, and clouds of steel dust, the Empire State was more than a structure. It was a statement. New York pressed on. While much of the nation faced hardship, Manhattan reached skyward, and its architecture reflected the era's divided spirit. Refined yet bold, hopeful yet fiercely driven. The Art Deco style embodied these contrasts, sharp yet fluid, forward-looking yet rich in symbolism. Skyscrapers were more than practical. They were crafted works of art, glowing at night like symbols of hope. But behind all that brilliance, there was intent. These skyscrapers were the visions of barons and tycoons who sought more than wealth. They craved legacy, a lasting mark on the skyline and in history. By the close of the 1930s, Manhattan's outline had solidified. The city had evolved beyond a financial hub. It had become a monument to ambition. Its skyline didn't murmur advancement, it declared it. Following World War II, Manhattan's skyline stepped into a new chapter. It was a shift toward the streamlined and the corporate. The ornate charm of Art Deco gave way to glass facades, steel frames, and clean lines. As America emerged as a global superpower, New York became the command center of that dominance. The skyline evolved in step, not with intricate crowns, but with symbols of productivity. In 1952, the United Nations headquarters rose along the East River, a sleek rectangular glass tower bordered by low marble wings, bold in its simplicity. It signaled a new tone, global, diplomatic, forward-looking. More than just a structure, it was a bold architectural expression of international cooperation in the atomic era, setting a precedent for what lay ahead. Soon after came the Lever House in 1952 and the Seagram Building in 1958. Both stood as defining icons of the international style. These towers, clad in reflective glass and supported by steel frames, embraced a minimalist ethos, devoid of ornament, void of nostalgia. They bore no resemblance to cathedrals or castles. Instead, they resembled machines, sleek, modern, and uncompromisingly efficient. The Seagram Building, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, was particularly impactful. With its bronze-tinted glass, strict grid layout, and open plaza, it brought a new kind of presence to the city. Not one that dazzled with ornament, but one that conveyed structure, control, and strength. This was the height of corporate architecture. Cool, elegant, and commanding. As business flourished, so too did the skyline. Midtown emerged as the center of America's corporate power, home to banks, media giants, law firms, and major companies. These modern skyscrapers weren't chasing beauty. They were competing for floor space, prime addresses, and dominance in the skyline. The graceful spires and ornate gargoyles had vanished, replaced by glass-clad monoliths, towering, impersonal forms that mirrored not only the sky, but the towering ambitions of Wall Street. And yet, in their stillness and restraint, these towers conveyed a powerful message. They told the tale of a nation fixated on expansion, efficiency, and the future. They became the face of the corporate age, influencing skylines and cities worldwide. But even surrounded by glass and steel, one truth endured. The skyline remained a symbol. Only now it spoke power in a whisper, rather than proclaiming beauty aloud. By the late 1960s, New York had already become a vertical work of art, but its ambitions hadn't peaked. A new vision began to rise at Manhattan's southern edge, where two identical towers would soon redefine the skyline. They were daring, divisive, and unlike anything the world had witnessed before. They were the twin towers of the World Trade Center. Envisioned as a center for international commerce, the World Trade Center was developed under the direction of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Architect Minoru Yamasaki crafted the towers with a bold, minimalist vision. Clean vertical lines, sleek aluminum facades, and no traditional setbacks. Each tower would soar beyond 1,600 feet, eclipsing anything that came before. The goal extended beyond architecture. It was a statement of ideology. It was a declaration of global connection, a modern temple to capitalism. Construction started in 1966, and to clear space, the historic neighborhood known as Radio Row was demolished. Building the foundations demanded an innovative method called the slurry wall, which enabled engineers to excavate deep into the soft riverbed while keeping the Hudson River at bay. It became one of the era's most complex and groundbreaking engineering achievements. When they were finished in 1973, the Twin Towers didn't receive universal praise. Some critics found them boxy or lacking character, while others lamented the disappearance of the more decorative skyscrapers of earlier eras. Still, to many observers, the towers symbolize sheer presence, bold, self-assured, and imposing. They didn't shimmer playfully like the Chrysler Building or narrow gracefully like the Empire State. Instead, they stood unyielding, twin monuments of certainty and scale. The World Trade Center stood for more than architecture. It became a global emblem of commerce, unity, and American strength. Visitors from across the globe came to take in the views from the observation decks, enjoy a meal at windows on the world, or simply gaze upward in wonder from the plaza. For almost 30 years, the Twin Towers reigned over Lower Manhattan, anchoring its skyline with balance and dignity. And though other cities constructed taller buildings, none matched the symbolic power of those twin towers standing side by side. The skyline had transformed once more, this time not through decoration or elegance, but through overwhelming ambition. Then, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, Manhattan's skyline was changed forever. Not by cranes or construction, but through violence and smoke. In under 2 hours, the World Trade Center's twin towers crumbled into debris, flames, and mangled steel. Thousands perished, and the towering icons that once shaped Lower Manhattan vanished. The attack was more than destruction of lives or structures. It was a strike against symbols, against everything those towers had come to represent. Commerce, progress, freedom, ambition. For years, the Twin Towers had marked the southern tip of the island, their sleek, monumental shape serving as a visual shorthand for New York. Now, that familiar skyline was broken. In the days and weeks after, Lower Manhattan resembled an open wound, smoldering, exposed, and aching. Where there had once been height and light, there remained only emptiness. And that emptiness resonated. Images of the skyline appeared incomplete. The once recognizable outline was shattered. The place that had buzzed with international energy was now called Ground Zero. For the first time in 100 years, Manhattan wasn't reaching upward. It was in mourning. The city wept, yet it persisted. Steelworkers, firefighters, police, and volunteers flooded the site. Not to build, but to search, to recover. The debris was cleared. The fallen were remembered. In place of iron's clang, there was silence. In a city defined by constant motion, this was an abrupt stillness, a collective breath held in grief. Yet even in mourning, New York did what it always had. It looked upward. Talks of rebuilding stirred deep emotions, complex, political, and raw. What should stand where the towers once rose? Should anything rise at all? Could the skyline be renewed without forgetting what was lost? For years the void remained, a powerful reminder of what once stood and what had been lost. It became hallowed ground, yet gradually plans began to take shape. Designs were drawn, cranes reappeared, steel rose once more. Not to forget the sorrow, but to build something new alongside it. Before any structure rose, one truth had already emerged. The skyline was no longer only a symbol of strength or aspiration. It had become a memorial, a silhouette defined by both resilience and loss. And the story continued. In the wake of destruction, a city famed for its pace, drive, and momentum came to a halt. Not in defeat, but in reflection. Reconstructing the Manhattan skyline after 9/11 was more than an architectural challenge. It was a question of identity. What could stand where the Twin Towers once soared? Could anything truly take their place? The answers unfolded gradually. In 2003, architect Daniel Libeskind's vision was chosen for the new World Trade Center site. The focus wasn't solely on height, it was about healing, remembrance, and rebirth. The design combined office spaces with memorials, green areas, transit hubs, and light. It wasn't an attempt to recreate the past, but a declaration of future possibility. At its center stood a new beacon, One World Trade Center. Originally named the Freedom Tower, it rose from the northwest edge of Ground Zero, eventually becoming the tallest structure in the Western Hemisphere, at 1,776 feet, a height chosen to reflect the year of America's independence. But the message went beyond patriotism. It spoke of defiance, of rising once more in the face of loss. Construction started in 2006, and by 2014, One World Trade Center welcomed the world. Wrapped in gleaming glass and shaped like a crystal obelisk, it made no attempt to replicate the past. Instead, it presented something new, reflection, both in form and meaning. The tower shifts with the sky, a glowing, dimming, or fading depending on the light. It stands with quiet strength, not boastfulness. Nearby, the 9/11 Memorial opened in 2011. Two vast voids now mark the footprints of the original towers, each holding a cascading waterfall and the names of the fallen inscribed in bronze. It's more than a piece of architecture, it's woven into the city's soul. The new skyline emerged slowly over time. Additional towers rose, 3 WTC, 4 WTC, and 7 WTC, each one sleek, contemporary, and intentional. Together, they symbolize not just a rebuilt city, but a city reimagined. New York didn't simply rebuild, it transformed. It paid tribute to what was lost while forging a path forward. In doing so, it reminded the world of something profoundly American and unmistakably human. You can bring a city to its knees, but you cannot stop it from rising. Today, the Manhattan skyline stands as more than just an array of buildings. It is a living emblem of ambition, of resilience, of the American dream itself. No other skyline carries such meaning. It's imprinted on pop culture, history, and collective memory. With just 5 lines, it's instantly recognizable. It speaks of a story, of daring engineers and fearless ironworkers, of architects who dreamed of spires touching the clouds, and of immigrants who crossed oceans to help make those dreams real. It tells of risk, reward, and reinvention, the restless energy of New York itself. It has never been complete and likely never will be. The skyline is living in a state of constant evolution. In recent years, it has soared even higher, but not in lower Manhattan. This time, the upward push shifted uptown. Along Billionaire's Row, ultra-slim residential towers such as 432 Park Avenue Central Park Tower and 111 West 57th Street now pierce the midtown sky like needles. These skyscrapers are engineering marvels, narrow, wind-resistant, and designed for the world's wealthiest. Some critics view them as sky-high symbols of inequality, while others praise them as testaments to modern ambition. At the same time, Hudson Yards has emerged as an entirely new district, filled with shimmering towers, public art, and corporate hubs, rising where once there were only rail yards. The skyline now extends farther west, reshaping itself to reflect the city's evolving needs and aspirations. Yet even as it expands, the skyline clings to its past. The Empire State Building still shines each night, the Chrysler still catches the first light of dawn, and One World Trade Center stands tall with quiet pride. The skyline honors what was, even as it reaches toward what's ahead. More than any monument or statue, it is the skyline that truly defines New York. Not just in shape, but in significance. It's where humanity has boldly reached skyward time and again, through prosperity, hardship, conflict, and healing. A city of millions mirrored in steel and glass. It doesn't simply trace the city's edge, it marks the place where dreams take flight. In Manhattan, the sky has never been the limit. It's just the next floor up.